Welcome to Business Minus the BS with me, your host, Michael Griffiths.
Thank you for coming on today and talking with me about data and all that seemingly scary stuff. Before we jump into all of that sort of stuff, would you mind telling us or the audience about who you are, what you do, business does, that sort of thing, your background, as it were?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Rohit. I am the owner of Perfect Virtual. I'm also a content creator over on YouTube, Twitch, and all those other platforms as the Data Swami. So in terms of the Data Swami, my purpose there is more explaining all of these data, AI, and tech things in layman's terms. So getting rid of all the jargon. It's one of the things I've hated about this market is all that jargon. So it's made people sound a lot smarter than they actually are. So I want to get rid of all of that. And in terms of Perfect Virtual, the business side of things, we work with businesses to deliver real-time actionable insights. So we sort of focus around a business's strategy, targets, and goals to pick out insights that they can take action on so that they can then increase their profits and revenue. So trying to make that as simple as possible. Again, without the jargon, because there's too much of a divide between IT and the business, whereas understanding the business is sort of the priority really there. In terms of my background, I guess we can start at university. I did economics and international development as a bachelor's degree. And then from there, got into financial services. And ever since then, been working with data. Started out doing data analytics and worked with various businesses from Prezzo, Johnson & Johnson, Credit Suisse, lots of different sizes and industries. And sort of found that a lot of the time when you have businesses that are so big like Credit Suisse, they have all the tools, every single tool you could think of. But when it comes to actually using the data and the insights, they could have the insights, but it takes them probably a year to make a decision. And by that time, the market's moved. And sort of that sort of is what made me go into the business side of things, is to both help small and large businesses actually be able to use their data to take action in real time.
Excellent. So some really interesting stuff in there, and a journey that has no doubt resulted in the accumulation of an enormous amount of knowledge on the subject from all different sides and sizes and whatnot, which is fantastic. So for people, hang on, before I continue, if you can hear a strange noise in the background, I have a cat that's coming into season and there is nowhere in the house I can put her where we can't hear her. So if you do hear strange noises, it is just a cat and it's meant to do that.
I've got both of our dogs just snoozing here.
Yeah. For business owners, especially when they're just starting out, for those smaller ones, the one-man bands, the self-employed and the freelancers and so on, or even people with a super small team, they are constantly told by everyone and their wife on the internet about how they need to be collecting data, analyzing data, using data, do this with data, do that with data, which sounds like a lot to take on board. And for those people, it does seem a lot like the equivalent being, this is the entirety of the Chinese language and you've got a day to learn it and become fluent. That kind of seems to be how it feels. So for those that are hearing about all this stuff and it's just like straight over their head, don't make no sense, and scary, overwhelming, and so on. If you could simplify the explanation of exactly what it is, the concept at least of, data and AI and all of those things, and why it's actually important to their business, especially those smaller folks, because obviously they've been told it's important. They've been told collect this data, but then they don't know why. So they just end up with an enormous database of useless information.
Exactly. So when it comes to the way people explain data and AI, it's very technology driven. It's all, look at this fancy piece of AI. It can do this, this, and this. The same with data. People start calling it the new gold. But really, it is the new gold, but it's all a tool for impact. And when I say impact, that means what you're able to do with it to, say, make decisions, move your business in a different way. And to do that, you do need to be able to have your data, analyze it, get insights from it, all of those bits. And the way that it's explained at the moment is very complex. I mean, the people who explain it at the moment, they would probably say, you have to get an Excel sheet, look at a graph, and you would end up spending a week looking at a set of data, trying to find the insights, trying to understand what's important in those insights, and at the end of it, not really coming out with anything because it's not focused. You don't know what impact you're supposed to be making. So one of the things that I say in terms of the way that we work with businesses is that you need to focus first on what you're trying to achieve as a business. So, one of the things that we have at the moment is where we purely just focus on sales leads for smaller businesses, because ultimately for a small business, sales is the most important part. What data you should collect on those? Well, it depends on what type of product you're selling. Are you calling up businesses? If so, you need to know when you're calling them up, what time of day, because then when you then take it to something else to get the insights from it, you can gather some really key insights to say, right, okay, so if we're looking at our sales leads, we know that calling, say, a 65-year-old man who's retired at 10 o'clock in the morning is fine because he's most likely not doing anything. Calling him at, say, 3 o'clock in the afternoon might not be so good because he might be out on the golf course. Obviously, you're not going to get quite those insights, but you'll be able to see those sorts of things. And then that way you can then take those insights to say, right, now that we know these different types of ideal clients, essentially, we can change the way that we approach them. And then when you look at artificial intelligence, there's lots of different artificial intelligences out there. I mean, there are AIs that help with predicting things. There are AIs that, do copywriting for you just to make that side of things easier. There are AIs that do insights. They're all just tools. At the end of the day, they're all just tools to make certain jobs easier and quicker. They're not going to solve all of your problems. But if you have a good idea of what your strategy is, what your targets are, then you can pick and choose which ones you should use. And as well, most small businesses, even medium to larger businesses, are not going to want to have what I call a data science team. Because quite frankly, they don't need them all the time. They only need them for certain use cases. And, there are offerings out there where you can have someone do it for you and give you the predictions there. And most of the time, they will be better than having an in-house team because you don't have to manage them. I was looking up the costs of having your own data science team. And it would, for a good quality one that's managed and, produces regularly, it would most likely cost you upwards of £400,000 a year, just for salaries. That's not even taking into account the tech or anything like that. So small businesses have been told there's lots and lots of things that they need. They need this tool, they need that tool. Ultimately, they don't. In terms of what they hold in terms of data, they need to just understand what their strategy is, what their targets are, and gather data around that. And then once you've got that, you can build insights pretty quickly, and have them just based on that data. And then as you grow, because you're focused on your targets and your goals, you can then create more data based on different categorical things about your products and things like that to then do more advanced insights. And introduce AI if you want to. It does make your life easier in some respects, but again, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. If you don't have enough data, then it's not really going to give you that much.
Yeah. One thing about AI, which is a little bit disconnected from its business use, well, quite a lot disconnected from its actual business use, but one thing about AI that I've noticed is, partly thanks to things like the Terminator and so on, people have a very science fiction idea about what AI really is. Now, I've programmed neural nets, which is actually much easier than it sounds. But so I've programmed neural nets in my time, and they were to do a very specific thing. They take information through and assign a bias and weight and so on, but it is for a very specific outcome. Can't do anything outside of that. So when you're dealing with people, how many people come forward with an idea about what AI is and what they're going to have included in their business that is somewhat silly and, well, maybe not silly, but massively influenced by the entertainment world and not so much by the real world? And how much time do you have to spend explaining what it really is in the reality instead?
So in terms of the business world, I haven't really had to explain it that much. Obviously, the way AI started out, especially theoretically, was general AI, which was the whole concept of a computer program that was able to think like us. Obviously, we're nowhere near that. So we have like neural networks, I guess they call it simple AI, able to do specific tasks. Then you've got lots of different aspects of that, machine learning, auto machine learning, deep learning, everything that's under the sun that's possible. But again, they're all focused on specific outcomes. When I talk to businesses, there is the one case of where they believe that it's capable of doing a lot more than it actually is. They think it's going to automate everything. I was like, well, you could, but that's like custom development of something. It's not just going to do that out of the box. But it does surprise them in some ways, especially when in regards to my world, in terms of insights and predictions, it's able to pick out links between different things quite quickly. So whereas, say, if you're trying to analyze your data, you want to know, again, so it's like the age link to calls. It would take you a bit of time to jump to that. Whereas with machine learning, it can say, right, well, these things are correlated. What's the best way to describe correlated? I guess in some ways linked. So one goes up, the other one goes up or down. And so you can find those sorts of things. And you can also find what's the most important factor. So whenever you're looking at data, you can't easily get to say, right, this is the most important factor for someone to buy from us. Whereas AI can help with that a lot easier, because it's doing about 100,000 calculations in a second. So it's, in terms of businesses, just again, it's all just focusing their view as to ignore a lot of what you've seen, ignore a lot of what you think might happen, just focusing on what your business is doing, and then build from there. So there was a sort of a research paper done by MIT into AI projects, and they did a whole wide research on all the different projects that various businesses had done, and sort of understood how focused they all were. So what they found was only 10% of those projects ended up in a financial benefit to the business after a year. And one of the biggest things was they were not focused on a specific business outcome. They were just, you probably had someone like McKinsey or Deloitte or PwC coming along and saying, yeah, we can do all of these things. And, they build a whole load of list of things that they can do with AI and look at what possible. But none of it ends up in an outcome of impact for the business. Which, when you're considering, I think they spent, last year, they've spent about, the whole of the world spent around 60 billion on AI projects. And if only 10% of that is delivering a financial benefit, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah. Those businesses that are on the receiving end of the 90% of non-result producing AIs and systems and whatnot, for those people, is there anything that you would suggest that maybe like a warning sign, a signpost or whatever, that would help them to identify whether their system is actually going to put them in that 10% or not?
I think the biggest signpost is if there is no view as to what the specific business outcome will be at the end of it. If they're not targeting it for a business need, then what are they doing?
Yeah. Okay, cool. When you're dealing with smaller companies, obviously you're helping them to figure out what systems they need and to implement them and so on. What do you need from them in order to get enough data for you to be able to figure out what's right for them, if that makes sense?
So really, it's more understanding, I guess, their business model, what their strategy, what their targets are, what their goals are, understanding what they already have. So what sort of data they already have, what structure they're using, and sort of seeing how that fits into whether it's just delivering insights or whether it's providing predictions as well. From there, with the amount of cloud resources available, it's easy to just say, well, right, you've done this, so now all we need is something like Amazon Web Services, and that's it. And as well, if they're a smaller business that don't have, say, the IT function, then again, we can take that on board to say, right, we'll do all of this side of things. All you need to do is provide us with that data. And then what we'll do as well is we'll start enriching it with your other sources. So one thing, say, because we focus on the sales leads for smaller businesses, it's just getting as much information about that sales lead before they've gone through the process. So say finding out what marketing channel they've come from, any other sort of general information that they can get about them to then push it through the predictions. But then as well, we can sort of figure out, right, based on, say, they might use a CRM system or they might use Excel. So we'd probably push them to use a CRM system, because that way it's all stored in one place, it's all uniform. And it shouldn't be too hard to fill out. And then from there, we can then get more information out. Okay, so we've called this person once and they converted, but we called this person once and they didn't. Let's see why that happened. So yeah, it really depends on the organization. And I would always say for a smaller business, again, they don't need a data science team. So it's easier for them to just use an outsourced business like us to just deliver the end result and deliver that impact.
Excellent, excellent. In your time dealing with people and obviously helping them understand the benefit you provide to their lives by dealing with all this data for them and whatnot, have there been any any common themes in terms of like roadblocks that need to be overcome? I didn't articulate that very well, so let me give you an example. So when I was doing software development, I would have people come to me and say, I want a website, I want an app. And 60–70% of those people, I've got an exact figure somewhere, but it was between 60 and 70% of those people didn't know why. They just knew that they just thought they needed it. They didn't know what they wanted to do. They don't know what, they don't know whether they're willing to commit to the work that goes into actually market, and so on and so forth. So there's all these different parts that come into it. So they come to me and say, I want an app, I want a website. So I had, after a few of those encounters, I had a list of questions, like a tick list of questions to go through that were commonly asked questions and whatnot to help me figure out what they actually need. But it also helps them figure out whether they really need this thing or not. So those were super common. Oh, I think I need it because everyone's got one. So that was that particular roadblock, having to get, go through that process long before we start talking about the website or the app or whatever itself. So that was really, really common. There were some unusual ones and whatnot, but that was repeated over and over. So is there any in your world that are quite commonly repeated?
So, yeah. So especially when it comes to businesses wanting insights, so the common thing is, oh, we need insights, and that's it. I was like, okay, what insights? We just need insights. Yeah, but what insights do you need? What are you trying to look for? So, and to be fair, it's happened in my contracting days as well. There is a lot of I need this graph. I was like, why do you need this graph? Oh, I just need it. And so a lot of my time is sort of challenging. I was like, well, what do you need the insights for? Ultimately getting to what are the key questions you're asking here? What do you need to know to do your job, grow your business, whatever? And so it's a bit of a process, but it's, especially when it comes to data, it's where that whole IT business issue occurs. IT in itself has grown into so many different things. But when it comes to data, even data science and all the things around data, it needs to be focused around the business. It can't be focused around IT, because in current situations, IT has no clue what the business needs. It's one thing where I see program managers who are more IT focused deciding what does and doesn't get developed for the business. And you see the amount of frustration in, say, the ops people or the sales people. It's like, why are you not doing this? Oh, well, the cost benefit analysis wasn't written out properly. It's like, come on. So it's breaking that barrier of just focusing it around the business, because ultimately that's what pays the bills. It's what will help do more development. It's what will take those insights and then create even more. So we do those insights for them, and then once they start growing, you then have to create more and more to help them refine their process. And the center of it is creating more revenue, creating more profits.
Okay, cool. So in your time, obviously analyzing, dealing with all this data, you and your team have more than likely accumulated a fair amount of knowledge and understanding of the operations of various different companies and organizations and whatnot in the world. Has that in itself helped you in your business, help you to streamline and improve your own business, do you think?
So actually, while working with the likes of the big banks and like Credit Suisse, UBS, that is what helped devise what I call our data-led decision-making framework. Because ultimately, it created that sort of concept of using the strategy, targets, and goals, and then digging down into what infrastructure was needed to then develop insights. So that working there helped devise that. In terms of the business operations, though, they're just too big to. Actually, no, I would say it's helped show me a direction I don't want to go.
Yeah.
It's shown me that we can't have steering committees upon steering committees to attempt to make a decision. We need to be more fluid and move as the market takes us, which in some parts is why I've introduced artificial intelligence to all of that, because it's an extra tool that's helped us be able to react in real time.
You raised an interesting, sorry, I'm totally interrupting, I apologize. Just quickly, because it's popped into my head. You raised an interesting point there. So, excuse me. Well, you said about it showing you a direction that you don't want to go in. And I feel that's actually just something I want to highlight quickly, because that's super important. Knowing, certainly in my coaching business and dealing with entrepreneurs and, bigger businesses as well and whatnot, knowing what to avoid is just as important as knowing what to do, if not more important, because that gives you a better indication of what you should be embracing.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to highlight it, because it's not something that's talked about enough, I don't think. Having a list of 100 things that you know not to do is far more useful than having a list of one thing that you think you should do. When you can combine the two, it's great, but so I just wanted to stop and highlight that quickly, because that's a really important point. So, but yeah.
And I think that that is important. You need to know what you don't want to do, and who you don't want to do business with as well. it's got to be true to you. But then as well, in terms of the way that I want my business, one of the things that I want to take it towards is, I don't know if you've watched Linus Tech Tips on YouTube.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. So because we do the content creation as well, so we have the media side of things there, and then we've got our, I don't want to say proper work, but it's sort of but our sort of data and AI services work. I want to have them in a sort of space where we have an office to go to, but it's set up for the content creation as well, so it's easy. So we've sort of looking at having our own office space where it's essentially in a warehouse, but set up the sets so that everything's all done and dusted there, and then have the office space as well. So that's something that I definitely want to implement. When I'm hoping we do that this year, because that'll make the content so much easier to create rather than having to put lighting and everything up and then down, up and down.
Excellent. When you get there, when you get to that point and you've actually got that all set up and ready to go, do you think, other than making it easier to create content and being able to switch between the two with a bit more ease, do you anticipate there being any sort of extra secondary benefits to that?
So in terms of being able to have, so essentially we'd have not two separate teams, but two teams that would work together. So we'd have essentially our content creation side of things, and then we have our AI data focused teams. But I want them both connected to each other. So having that space easily connects them for then as well creating the content, but also putting into creating the data tools. And as well, it gives us a space to bring clients that is our own, but it's more dedicated to clients.
Excellent. Well, that's something I actually, it sort of leans into something I wanted to ask you about actually. So obviously we think about all the data we collect when we're generating leads, closing sales, marketing, and so on and so forth. When I was growing up, my dad always used to say to me, because he was in the financial world, he used to say to me that pretty much everything in a business can be quantified in business terms. So he always used to give me an example of, you go and take your car to the garage to get some work done. They've got a waiting room. It's nice and warm. It's quiet. It's got a TV or a radio so it's not completely silent. There's a coffee machine in there and so on. Now those things, financially, at least directly, aren't necessarily quantifiable, but they are in terms of that person, that driver, has a comfortable place to go and sit while they've got to wait. They haven't got to go somewhere else, go out in the rain, out in the cold. They can have a coffee, they can sit and listen to radio, whatever, and be reasonably comfortable. So then when it comes time to pay, they're happier. And when they get to that point and they're happier, they have less objections. They have less opportunity to complain and, I don't like this, I don't like that. You took too long, you did this, you did that. So it is indirectly quantifiable financially as well for them. So do you anticipate much change with those, those indirectly quantifiable things? Having the new place, do you think there is going to be a noticeable difference in terms of the response, that you're given from your customers when they're in that environment, they're comfortable and they're happy and so on? And do you collect any data and analyze any data on those things?
So essentially what your dad has said is essentially what data-led decision making is all about. It's everything contributes to a specific data point. And again, focused in, it leads towards those targets and goals of a business. In terms of for us, one of the key things that it will do is help to increase the quality of our content and create more consistency. And in doing so, that will help engagement across all of our channels. And it helps us to achieve one of our key goals in being a thought leader in this space, especially with getting rid of the jargon. In terms of the office space for customers, I would say it's going to give us a space of our own to have them there with us so that I don't want to say a more professional environment, because I mean, I'm in a hoodie, I'm not wearing suits. It's not my style, but it does give us, this is our space, welcome to our space. And that sort of welcoming nature to it. And showing that we are not just some back office IT department. With their sort of real proper business focused people who just happen to work with data and AI.
Excellent. So they give you a bit more, I think clout's the right word, but make it easier for your customers to empathize and understand what you're really there to do for them.
Yeah.
Excellent. Have there been any situations in your time working with data where you've been presented with a project or a situation where you have had to maybe politely tell them to throw it all out and start again, or scrap, most of it and rebuild?
Yeah, I have. I've never actually done it politely.
Yeah.
I have always been honest with them in terms of the way that it looks and what it's delivering. When it comes to delivering insights, I feel strongly enough that I don't want to be messing around a business when they're trying to achieve something. So I will tell them, it's like, look, this is not delivering what you need it to do, and it never will do. You need to scrap it and recreate something that will actually deliver it. It's most common to happen when the finance department are in charge of insights, because they love a spreadsheet. They love taking hours and hours finding out things about the data. I call it busy work because that's what it is. So yeah, it happens quite a lot, to be fair, where it's like, this needs to go and we need to do something different that is actually focused on what you're trying to achieve. Obviously that done in a nice style, but always talking about what the outcomes are. If someone understands what the outcome is, what the impact it will make, it's less of a, I can't be bothered to redo this. It's more, okay, so yeah, now we're going to actually get this out of it. And that's where our sort of business focus comes in. Again, it's because we are not doing the whole IT style, sort of giving IT people a bad name in this thing.
Yeah. So have you found there's been much, do you get much resistance when you have to say, it's not working out, your outcome, your desired outcome is not even connected to this thing, so we need to scrap this and try something else. Do you get much resistance from that? Like, as you mentioned, the financial department, for example,
Yeah.
in the middle.
Finance are the most problematic with this for some reason. But I would say they're not like overly problematic. I mean, I've always found a way to get them on side. And most of the time is just talking them through the whole process of what it means to be data-led. And also it's a good way of so one of the things that I've found with the data-led approach is you're able to link everyone's role to see how it impacts the business. So when we do that, it's easier to show to them, right, as a finance department, because you're not spending 20 hours a week trying to scroll through all of this data, you now got 20 hours to focus on something else. And then that results in X amount of reduced costs because you're not doing busy work anymore. Whereas like initially it feels like, oh, but you're taking away my job. What am I going to do? And so it's just guiding people through that process of this is what it means to be data-led. It's not about changing your job. It's not about making you redundant. It's helping you with your time to be better managed and to be able to then make decisions quite easily. And as well, it also helps because the sort of the leads, the directors and things like that are not doing as much busy work inside the business. So they know that their team have all of the tools and insights at their disposal to just leave them to do it because they've got all of the insights. When it comes to a decision, they know they've hired that person in that position to make those decisions, but they also have every piece of insight to make a well-informed decision. So there's no need to micromanage. Makes their lives a lot easier. They can just look at the insights. Oh yeah, we're doing well, and it's fine.
Excellent. So your aim with AI is to help people make more money and spend less money from a business perspective overall. For smaller companies, the one-man bands, the self-employed, the teams of husband and wife teams and so on and so forth, is they're just starting and the whole world's telling them collect data, so on and so forth. When you first start, especially a smaller company like that, your only real concern is marketing, sales, and delivery. Everything else is just nice to have. So for those, most basic functions, to put them in good stead for the future and the potential for an increase and scale up and whatnot, what data should people be collecting that is going to be useful moving forward, but isn't also going to overwhelm that one-man band or that husband and wife team?
Yeah. So I would say just use Hubspot to collect their sales leads. Find out where they're from. That is the marketing channel thing. There's one thing that I have seen is smaller businesses end up focusing more time on marketing than they do on their sales process, which, it's bound to happen because, you're trying to get as many leads as possible. But then when it comes to getting leads, the conversion rates just are not good enough. So I would just do HubSpot for sales leads, collect as much information about that lead as you can. If you're selling to people, find out their age. Are they retired? Are they married? Different categorical data around that. Obviously, you've got to be careful with things like GDPR and everything, but HubSpot does help to guide you with that. I use HubSpot as an example because that's the simplest one I've found that has as many integrations as possible. And, it's got forms as well that just go directly into it. Something that, find something that does as much as you want without you having to do too many things, because otherwise you're doing that rather than converting sales leads. So that's the main thing to get. When you contact them, when they've converted, when they haven't, have they bought from you again? All those different bits of information are great. Because then once you've got enough of that data, you can then look at it and say, right, okay, we have these types of ideal clients. We have these clients who have bought this product, but there's also a match between people who have bought product B. So we could actually, rather than just trying to find new buyers for product B, we've already got a whole pool of them that we can sell to. Because then that develops more and more about what your ideal client is, what that mix is. And then, then introduce that into AI if you want to. I would, so the reason I say to bring AI into small businesses is the biggest thing about actionable insights is taking action on them. And smaller businesses are able to act like that, whereas bigger businesses take a while. So they have the ability to take advantage of AI delivered like insights a lot more. It's just, making sure that they are collecting that sort of data and it gets to a certain volume that we can use.
Excellent. There's a good shout with the HubSpot as well. I've tried a few CRMs over the years, and I've used HubSpot as well. And for a non-tech person, which is the vast majority of people out there, it's by far the easiest to use. But it's also really quite complete as well.
And it's free as well.
Yeah. There are some other little ones around, but they don't have, that I've seen, don't have the functionality and scalability of the HubSpot CRM. And with HubSpot and their own tech support and stuff, you haven't got to maintain a system either. You just put it in and look at the results.
It's all cloud-based as well. So, you don't have to store anything anywhere. You ain't got some dodgy Excel spreadsheet that's going to get corrupted. And it's I guess in some ways it's convenient.
And another question I wanted to ask, and this also applies to small businesses because, well, nobody likes a spreadsheet quite as much as a small business owner. And as someone who has spent a considerable amount of time building back-end systems and what databases and whatnot in my time, I have seen some Excel spreadsheets that should never have existed. They have been truly abused. Even Excel is telling them, please stop doing this. And they keep doing it. And it is thousands and thousands and thousands of rows of completely disconnected data. You've got everything about one person in one row. And it's a horrendous thing. How often do you get someone bring to you a stack of spreadsheets and go, so here's my jigsaw with no instructions and no picture on the box to look at, figure it out.
Also, the person that developed it left about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a common, well, no, it's less common now, I think, because of all the different things you've got out there. But it was something that just happened constantly. Even so, I'll tell you a story about UBS. So they had SharePoint lists for data, all separate, and it's something to do around data governance, and we had to link all of it somehow. And yeah, you can't link it all properly because, well, there's no IDs or anything like that to link it easily. I was like, in some ways, you should just not do this and start from scratch. Set it up in a better way. So yeah, it's I think it's part of the world. You're always going to have that possibility of someone who's got a ridiculous set of data that's not quite linked. Actually, so there's in the insurance industry, London Market have a standard for the way that their data extracts should be for like all of the businesses who are part of it. None of them actually use them. They found so London Market spent all this time developing this structure that everyone should use. So then that way, when you send someone over a whole spreadsheet of risks, it's easy to just chuck it into the database. No, they've got such legacy systems that they're still, we have to match it to our own thing before that. So then you could just got businesses who send out their own stuff to other insurance brokers and expect them to put that data into their systems. It's one thing I work with Hiscox on to get them all to use a standardized set.
So I did quite a few years ago now, in my software development days, I worked for a company. I'm not going to say who they were, I don't want to get sued, but I worked for a company and they had they wanted me to build a back-end system for their internal teams to use to manage their data, to integrate with all these different systems that they had, and so on. Most of that was fine. The data was the issue. I was given a combination of Excel spreadsheets, CSVs. So for anyone listening who doesn't know what a CSV is, it is what happens when you take an Excel spreadsheet and put it into Notepad. You just get comma separated values, CSV. And it is a horrible thing to look at. A machine can read it, a person cannot.
Well, a machine can't always read it.
Yeah, a machine can only read it if it has been well formatted and doesn't use any special characters. And it was an absolute nightmare. So I actually had to pay another company to decipher all that data and put it into create a data structure that then I could model a relational database on to actually get it all in. And we did that, and there was an enormous loss of data. I mean, they obviously had their originals, but there was so much of it that was technically invalid for whatever, for various different reasons. There's lots of validation things along the way, so it couldn't go in. So they had giant holes in their data. And now that they've had that system a few years, things are looking much brighter for them because it's consistent and so on, and they've been continuing to develop that system as well. But the data from pre-2015, I think it was, something like that, it's just, they might as well have just made it up. There were so many holes in it because they were just storing it in, like I say, spreadsheets and stuff, and then exporting data to other formats and then trying to export it back. And it was just killing data off left, right, and center. The whole thing was a total mess. That project should have taken me 2 months to do. I built the system in that time and had it all set up and whatnot. It took another 6 months for the data to be sorted and then inputted for the system to then actually use. It was an absolute nightmare. Have you encountered many like situations like that in your time that have been that have stood out as being, you know, someone somewhere should have looked at this and said, stop?
So, yeah. So this wasn't from my time as, say, a contractor or while working in the business, because most of the time when we get to the stage, it's just using the data. We don't have to do much of the infrastructure around it. And if we do, we sort of get the right people in. But while I was permanent in the organization I was in, so it was a financial services business, they had their old platform that ran on Internet Explorer 7. And this was, so I started there at 2013, left there in 2017. Internet Explorer 7 had been out of date for I don't know how long at that point. So they were so they were replatforming onto a new system. So the old system was built in-house. They'd already done all of the development themselves. They'd done a few updates to it. So they essentially put a new face on top of it. So it looked more modern, but the back end was still ancient. So a business came in that they had a few quotes from different businesses who deliver these sorts of platforms, most of them from Australia. They got told it could deliver everything they needed. And that was great. So they went with this supplier. There was a lot of custom build that had to be done, which they already knew about. And that started in 2014? It was supposed to be delivered in 3 years, the project. So it should have been, 2 years. It should have been delivered in 2016. And I can't remember the cost of it, but they ended up having to bring in Deloitte to project manage it, which ended up, I think the costs went up by 2.5 times, which was ridiculous. But it was sort of when you saw the functionality that was getting delivered, it was not the same as the old system. You weren't getting as much as what was there originally. And there was sort of like, well, maybe you should have looked at updating the old system so that it would be new, rather than bringing in this new platform that isn't quite built for what we need it for. We still need lots of, so they're still having to do lots and lots of manual things around the platform. And they only went live in 2019.
Blimey, yeah.
Yeah. So a massive overspend. And it still doesn't deliver quite exactly what they want. I think they still have the old system running as well, because they need to use it to reconcile financial figures, which is still mad.
That's quite the operational oversight there. There is
that's the thing. There's so many different contractors, project managers, PMO directors that came and went throughout the whole process. It was just mad.
Yeah. These things do end up with too many moving parts, and that just spirals things out of control. Financially, it spirals things out of control, and from a development side as well, it becomes an ever-changing set of goalposts.
Yeah.
And the developers then don't know, they're asked from their elbow, so don't know whether they're coming or going. And
that's the whole link between IT and business again. It was so the whole development of this project was even moved into a separate building because they had so many people working on it. So they got completely separated from the business, and they had their subject matter experts, but because the project went on for so long, these subject matter experts weren't actually working in that area anymore because they'd been involved in the whole project for so long. So in terms of being able to give the proper operational ideas of how it should work, they just didn't have it.
Yeah, it sounds like it turned into an absolute behemoth.
Yeah,
and I think
it
things
was
like that
a mess.
Hit a certain point where it just becomes like no one can stop it either. It's too much of a monster.
That's it. Well, at the point of when they got Deloitte in, that's where you think, why do you need to bring them in? Because all they did was send graduates. It's a common thing around the consultancies. They send graduates to do the job, charge $1,000 a day or something silly. And yeah, it was madness.
Yeah, I've had a few situations over the years that are that have ended up, or that I've been actively involved in. I've had to come to the rescue in a few cases where it started to go that way and blow up and stuff. And actually, in a lot of those cases, so they're developing those systems to generate all that data. So they got in their head an idea that they need data, and then they start this project, and then they don't think to themselves, well, I need data about the project to manage the project, to keep the project on track, so we can actually get that data that we need to get those business results that we need. And it just becomes a case of not should we do X, Y, and Z, just can we afford to do X, Y, and Z? And should always come before can we afford? But not collecting the data, and as you say, separating it out like that and having too many people involved, it just becomes a separate entity. And nobody can work like that. Eventually someone's going to come along and go, right, we need to get rid of all of that and start it again. It's going to be another one.
So one of the things that I've found, especially when it comes to data and insights, is people start it backwards. So they come up with their decision and then find the data to say, yes, my decision is correct. And to be fair, you can make data say whatever the hell you want it to say. It's very easy to do. You can set it up in a specific way. And quite often you end up with those sorts of decisions being made. And when it doesn't work, rather than blaming the process of that decision, they blame, oh, well, the data told us this. The data is the cause of the issue. Whereas the real issue was the process in which, well, you created these insights because you came to that decision already and wanted to say, this is the correct decision. It's like hypothesis testing. Whenever you're hypothesis testing, you should be out to prove yourself wrong rather than proving yourself right, because you're adding bias to it.
Absolutely. And as you say there, the bias, the influence that has on people's decision making is it's a little bit nuts, I guess. It's a very human thing. We look for a specific outcome. We're just wired that way. So I think it's often quite dangerous for a person to be too deeply involved with that process without spending some time outside of it looking at the whole thing in order to figure out what the data says the result should be, rather than trying to find data to, you know, do that confirmation bias to fit your result.
That's the thing. It's so easy to add bias to even your data. I mean, we found that when we use our artificial intelligence, we say for businesses not to clean it, don't touch it, don't mess with any of it, because what we found is when people do that, they only ever spot the things that they know about. They'll only correct, say, a client that they know is always going to be a little bit wrong in the data, so they'll fix that. But then because they've fixed that client, it adds bias and highlights it as something that's correlated, but actually it's not. It's just because they've updated only the bits of data that they know about. Best example of bias is, you remember when they were using the dreaded algorithm for student grades back in, God knows when that was now. So that, again, that was bias. It may not have been intentional, but they included data which shouldn't have been included. So I think they included location data for students. And so because of that, the algorithm is going to say, oh, well, these students tend to get lower grades because they are from this region or this school. And so it weighted it a lot higher in downgrading pupils who were getting the high grades down, whereas the weighting should be more focused on the grades that their teachers were providing, because, well, unless they added in constraints around saying there may be a bit of bias in terms of what the teachers are giving the grades. But that's one of the easiest sort of examples of bias there.
Yeah, I think that's something actually we all witness all the time as well. If you look at in the marketing world, for example, you've got the gurus, so to speak, and they're going, I can get you X amount more customers, I can get you this much more money, and so on and so forth. So they've got their incredibly small set of data from their own customers. They've pulled out the ones that don't fit with what they want to get out there, and then they've got that very small subset of data that's been 100% cherry picked, and they can go, but this is proof, look, we can do this, we do it for this person, that person, that person, come buy our, you know, marketing, whatever. And then obviously people almost immediately buy into that, because there is the emotional part of that person saying, look, you're suffering, I can help you.
Yeah.
So that they get that emotional connection, and then they look at the data that they're presented. So the person presenting that data, i.e. the guru, as I say, is only sharing what fits, you know,
it fits their world.
Yeah. So the customer then gets that. So they have that emotional pull in, like, I'm going to save you, I'm going to help you. And then the customer goes, right, well, I need some sort of logic to back up this decision. So they see that data, and then they're instantly sold. And that is total bias and that is an intentional and extreme case of the bias that is presented to us in data, but in a much more subtle way. Every time we're presented with statistics or you know, information about anything, there's always some element of bias. So is there anything that you would suggest to people that maybe are good questions to ask, or things to think about when they're presented with some data, to help them be able to be a little bit more objective about it, and a little less likely to be pulled into the the bias that comes with the narrative provided along with the data. That made sense at all.
Yeah. So I guess when it comes to, at the heart of it, data can't lie, but it can be manipulated. It can be shown in a specific light where, it gives a certain opinion. A good example of that is when you look at inequality in a country. So a couple of the measures they use are average earnings, average income. So I think I recently saw it when it looked at people buying houses, and how people nowadays don't have as much as people 30 years ago. But the interesting thing about that is, you've got 3 different averages there that you can use. You got median, mean, and mode. There is one average that is never present when people are talking about income, and that is the mode. So the mode is the most common income bracket or whatever it. So yeah, the most common income. So you need all 3 to get a good idea of inequality or the way that people are earning. Median and mean don't really tell you that much, because the amount of different points of data are so vast that the median it's going to be slap bang in the middle, but there's going to be so many down at the lower end and so many at the higher end. And the mean, it's going to be skewed by really, really low numbers and really, really high numbers. Whereas the mode would actually tell you, right, these are the highest number of people on this level. And that will give you the bigger picture. So in terms of when you're looking at, say, other people's stats, they say they've got 90% conversion rate. Okay, what does that mean? How many leads have they got? Are they saying 90% conversion rate only on one aspect of their business? Really get an understanding of, right, okay, what 90% conversion rate for what? Because it could just be a free thing. Or conversion rate could be just clicking on an email. They might not actually do anything else. So really look hard at the wording that they're using to make sure you understand what they're saying. Because as you know, with the gurus, there are a lot of charlatans out there. And as well, look at the industry that they're in. If they're saying they get X a conversion rate, what's the industry average? If they're matching the industry average, then they're not special. They're just doing what's normal. So yeah, just really look at the way that they word things when it comes to that sort of stuff.
That's really good advice as well, because it's really overwhelming for people, especially when they first start their business. They have all the worries about, am I good at what I do? We all worry about that. It doesn't matter whether you're the best in the world or the worst. We all worry about that. Am I good at what I do? Am I good enough at what I do? And you have am I likable enough for people to want me to do that thing for them? And then on top of that, you've got the actual sales, the marketing, the operations. And then on top of that, you've got all the external pressure of the gurus, the whatever they want to call themselves. Buy my course, follow my process, do this, do that. And it becomes so overwhelming. One person or a husband and wife team could never possibly do those things and still operate a business. So
it's full of noise, and gurus add to that noise, but also don't ever get AppSumo. It's so much noise with that as well. There may be some good deals on there, but you get so distracted by oh, this could actually help. Yeah, I'll be able to do this with that, and you never use it. It's just ends up being another piece of thing that you've got that's done nothing. And also comparing yourself to others. That is the biggest killer for just killing your motivation. I guess in some way, I've had it too. It feels as if some people find this a lot easier than you. When we're in the world of social media, that is the front that they put a lot of the time. That is the persona that they want to show, is they find it easy. It's fine. That's what they do. You don't have to be like them. You just need to focus on what you're good at and get the right tools to help you achieve that, rather than get every single thing that's out there.
There's an excellent point all round, but an excellent point with regards to AppSumo. In my software development days, I basically became a bit of a collector. There'd be, oh, this looks interesting, I'll buy that and see what happens. I've got lifetime licenses for things that I'll never use. I don't go on there anymore. I think I did the other week. I got something that I've actually been using. But other than that, I don't go on there unless I'm looking for something specific, because as I say, I just get these things come up and my tech-loving brain goes, oh, I'd quite like to spend a day digging into that. Have no real use for it in the real world, It just seems like an interesting way to spend a day. And then I'm like, right, so how can I make this fit into my life? Well, I don't need it. Until I saw it in front of me, I didn't even know it existed, so I don't need it. So there's no need. So I had to, have stern words with myself, because it's a dangerous place to be, especially when you've got access to money and you haven't got to worry about it. It's like, oh, well, it's only 70 quid here, a couple of £100 there, whatever here and there. And then I dread to think how much money I've spent on AppSumo over the years. And as I say, 2 or 3 things I actually use properly from AppSumo, and everything else just exists on my computer for no good reason other than I paid money for it. So, but yeah, I think that's really common as well. Just not necessarily AppSumo, but getting that, like you just start in and you get your accounting software in place, you get this, that, and the other all in place, and you're like, right, cool. And that feels really good. You feel really organized, really productive, and really like ready. And then these things come up in front of you and you're like, would that make me more ready? But no, you're already there. Stop.
Exactly.
So it's a very common thing. But yeah, thank you for all of that. I really appreciate you taking the time and coming to talk to me about AI and all of that wonderful stuff. Before we go, there's a couple of things. One, is there anything that you want to say to people, anything at all? And 2, where can people find you online, websites, social media, and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so I think in terms of when it comes to data insights, it can be scary. So again, as we're trying to get rid of all the jargon, I am here to answer questions about anything really around that, how to sort it out, what tools to use if you really want to know those things. And yeah, the sort of places to find me are, so we've got our business website, which is www.perfectvirtual.co.uk. But then we've also got our content creation side of things. So that's the dataswami.com. And we're Data Swami is our username on TikTok, Twitch, Trovo, YouTube. Where else? And then we are the Data Swami on Twitter and Instagram. And we also got a Discord channel as well. So if anyone wants to ask questions there as well, we've got all the links on our different social medias, especially Facebook as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for today. It's been really interesting. And AI is something I love to talk about. As I say, I've done some work in the field in the past, so I could talk all day about it and super geek out, but obviously my audience, that'd be like an alien language to them. So I've tried to keep it as relevant to the audience as possible. But yeah, it's been really interesting, and it is nice to talk to someone about it that can actually do so without all the jargon and all the ego and pompousness that comes along with the industry, because there is a lot. I mean, don't get me wrong, these people, they come up with these systems, they are very, very clever, but you know, you're still human. There are equally clever, if not more so, people around that are much nicer in the process. So
yeah,
it's really nice to be able to talk to someone who can be natural and talk about it in a way that actually makes sense to people outside of the tech world.
And to be fair, I hope this is the way that helps to get more and more businesses involved in it. And also, I'm not one for giving my job title a funny code ninja name or anything like that either.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of them around. But yeah, excellent. Well, thank you very much for today. I really appreciate it. And
thanks for having me.
I hope to have you on again at some point in the future. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.